um, Steve said, well, how are you getting home? He says, well, I don't know, and they said, give me a call. So it was about 10 o'clock, and he called, and he picked him up somewhere on Taylor Street. And my husband has a permit to carry a gun, and why would you go to a bad neighborhood when you. So he picked him up, and he was very, very, very bad. I mean, like the day before, he couldn't even walk right. He had his head back just like when he had his head injury, where he couldn't even have the right kind of gait walking. And he thought he had let the dog out and left the mail out. I mean, he just was really, really out of it, out of it. And I heard him come in, and Steve had come into the family room and said, boy, he is just really bad. He just can't walk. He's not making any sense. And evidently had gone upstairs, but he was right down, because all of a sudden we heard in the kitchen things falling. And I had done the dishes, so that wouldn't have been knocked all around. Anyway, I said to Steve, when we heard all that, I said, why don't you just go, have him sit down and you fix it. And I'm always worried about him eating, always have been ever since he had Crohn's, because he's got to eat. And so I said, why don't you fix him? And he went out there, and I heard him, or then Russ came out to me, and I was in the hallway by then, and because I could hear him arguing, and I said, he said, Dad, something, it didn't make any sense, and I said, he's just going to fix you something to eat. Just let him fix you something to eat. And just that quick, Steve, my husband, was on the floor, and him on him, and I said, do I have to call the police? Or I'm going to call the police. And then finally Steve said, yes, call the police. And I'm standing in the doorway, and my husband was wedged down by the dog dish. I mean, right there, the doorway. I mean, they couldn't go anywhere. And my son was on him. Once he realized for sure that I was calling the police, he just wailed into him. He's left-handed like me. And he just swung around, kept swinging on him. And my husband was just laying, he couldn't move. He was on his torso. And I just said, Russ, that's your father. That's your father. He was just beating him and beating him. They just didn't come. They just didn't come. And any other time, they came quickly. But later on, we found out that with the construction there on 24 and Reckewig, that they couldn't get through. So they had to go way down and come back up. I'm pushing at him and not thinking I'm getting anywhere. I'm not really realizing that with each swing I'm getting very bruised. I still have some of those bruises all. So then I thought I'll grab his hair. Well, his hair is pretty short, and I grabbed that thinking that might get him off of him. And that made him mad at me, I know I looked a couple times out there trying to hope that the next time I looked back that I could remember, they had moved a little bit over. They were still on the floor, but the position had changed, and I'm wondering, how did that happen? But then I do remember him looking up at me the second time, now that I think back, and just a horrible, 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 evil look. I think his eyes seemed black. I don't know if they were dilated or if that's just the way I saw, but he just looked at me with this horrible look and rage. Since they were over there, Russ was right in front of the sink, and he was still on knees. They never did get up. I mean, although at the beginning, my husband had a stomp mark on, footprint on his chest, which bothered him, like 3 days later. I said, what's the matter with my chest? Well, he had this bruise, and then you could see the footprint. So he said he stomped on his head too, and then his back of his head had lumps all over it, so evidently it was still hitting him when he went over there. Then I saw a flash. Well, first of all, I'll say, the woman on the 911 call said, "Is there any weapons?" And I looked up at the knife block. You had a couple blocks of knives up there, and I didn't want to say anything to her about that because I didn't want to give Russ any ideas, when he was doing. So I didn't say anything about it. I think I said no, not truly thinking, because Steve never even got a chance to sit down or anything. on TV they said he went and got a gun. If he could have got up and went and got a gun, this wouldn't have happened. We would have been out of the house, and but none of this would have happened. So it just, he was beating him to death. And then I saw the flash, and then I heard it. It's like, I know that's true, that, it's, light is faster than sound, but being that close, but it's just like it didn't register. And then I realized, and I remember just saying, oh God, and she said something on the phone and all that. And I didn't know who was hurt. I didn't know, because Russ was still sitting there, and he kind of went like this, and then he went like that. So I'm thinking, it's probably him. But I didn't know. And I mean, even though they were right there, because where they, I mean, I know what my husband says. It took him a long time. The gun was stuck in it, and he didn't go for it for a long time. He said, I was passing out. I couldn't, and he's 65 years old. He said, I have like 30 seconds but he was just defending himself the whole time. And he had no choice. The police didn't come. And then Russ raised up a little bit, and I thought maybe he was taking a breath and he was still alive, but I don't know if it was his last breath or if it was Steve getting up from underneath him, that disturbed the body enough. But he never fell forward, he never fell sideways. Steve said he was leaning this way against the cabinet. So he never fell, so I'm still thinking. And finally they came, and Steve got up. I mean, they hadn't come yet, but Steve got up and had this, I mean, he was all, beat up, but he was crying, and he just said, I'm sorry. Like, he had to apologize to me. And I said, I know. I was there, I know. And then they finally came, and they said, put the gun down. And so I kept telling Steve, you got to put the gun down somewhere. And so and they said, don't put it by Russ, So he came out into the foyer and trying to find somewhere to lay the gun. And the door is open, but you have to kind of open the door. There's two chests back there, and that's where we keep the Bible if we don't put it away. And after you come home from church, that's where he lays it. And so normally don't want to put anything on the Bible, anything, neither one of us, but he set it on there like it's in God's hands.